Hello and welcome to AA Just for Today, a talk show about maintaining your sobriety on a daily basis. My name is Dan, I'm an alcoholic, and I'll be your host as we discuss the things that threaten our sobriety from day to day. We hope that this show will help you to stay in the moment, focus on your sobriety, and forget about taking a drink just for today. So sit back and enjoy. We're going to have some speakers, we're going to have some great things coming your way, so come on back. Hi, and welcome back to AA Just for Today. My name is Dan, and I'm an alcoholic. Today we're going to be talking with Dick B. He's an author, and we're going to talk about things like the 5 principal phases of AA history and the sources and founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, things like the James Club and the original AA, Problems, Absolute Essentials, the conversion of Bill W., and the trail itself, the real 12-step fellowship history. So sit back and enjoy it, and we'll be right back with Dick B.
Okay, we're going to move fast from St. Johnsbury, Vermont, because Dr. Bob's story, in one sense, is like my own, and that is when he left St. Johnsbury and the church and Christian Endeavor, he simply went to college and drank. Now, I can relate to that.
Me too.
That's what I did, and fortunately, in law school, I did not do that, and for the first 10 years in my law practice, I didn't do it, so I have one up on Dr. Bob, but at a certain point, I began getting into it heavily, and the point is, my interest in the Bible and church was not intense, and some people have regarded Dr. Bob as never having any background. Well, he was so doggone solid in this that when he finally got into what we'll be getting into in a moment, it was old stuff to him, and he dived in and read the entire Bible 3 times and began using devotionals and all the stuff that I'll mention. So what he had was a massive blackout period of drinking. Now,
I know that. Like the 80s were kind of fuzzy for me.
He wouldn't have been a fully qualified alcoholic if he hadn't done that.
Exactly.
And he had one up on Bill because he drank longer, that's for sure. Now, what happened is, and we have to depart for a minute because it's relevant. What happened was that Russell Firestone was a drunk. And I have talked to more than one of the Firestone clan, and Russell was a bad drunk, and they didn't know what to do with him. In fact, it was even suggested that most of the Firestones were drunks, including Grandpa. And whatever the truth of that was, Harvey Firestone Sr. was left with a massive corporation and the lovely Firestone Hour on Sundays, but nobody to light the fire with. And so he was down in Florida, and that's a long story, but in a word, he picked up Jimmy Newton, a young man who was putting on the Thomas Edison birthday parties down there, brought him back to Akron with the intention of grooming him to be the president of Firestone Tire and Rubber.
Yeah.
I came to know Jimmy quite well and his wife, and Jim immediately hit it off with Russell Firestone, who was married, and he didn't know that Firestone was a drunk, and Jim never had a drop in his life.
Yeah.
And so when he found that out, he tried to help. Jim was very much enamored of Oxford Group principles, and he tried to help Russell get sober, even to the point of doing what seems unheard of today, and that is he went to a rehab with Russell just to support him. And so he tried his best. And one way or the other, the family decided to bring Reverend Sam Shoemaker out from New York, probably at the behest of Firestone's pastor, Dr. Walter Tooks. And when Shoemaker arrived, they piled Russell and a fifth a day on the train, on the railroad train, along with Reverend Shoemaker and Jimmy Newton and 1 or 2 Firestones. And they went to an Episcopal bishops conference, which I'm sure Russell Firestone had no recollection of before, during, or after.
Could you consider that an early intervention?
Well, in the sense it was. And that, you know enough about AA to know that it takes something to get us turned on.
Yes.
And so, yes, that's a good way of looking at it, and it was highly effective in this respect. As the train car came back, Sam Shoemaker got Russell Firestone into a compartment and led him to Christ.
Yep.
And by the time they arrived back in Akron, he considered that he was cured, and so did the family doctor. He said, I can't believe the change, almost the kind of thing that Bill saw in Ebby.
Yep.
And that is, Russell was different, and he wasn't drinking. Now,
a new creation in Christ, sounds
yes,
like.
and as happened, he can become a carnal Christian, which is what he did later, and became kind of a rake and a drunk in the later part of his life, although Jimmy never particularly wanted to concede that. But
Hard thing to do.
But in the first 2 years, Jim and Russell began traveling and witnessing for the Oxford Group. And as far as I know, and according to Jim, Russell stayed sober, and they were pretty powerful witnesses because he was able to say, as we do in AA, I was a drunk, and I'm sure he told the truth and said, and Sam Shoemaker led me to Christ, and I study the Bible, and blah, 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 and here I am.
Well, sometimes the higher a person is, or the more, in the public eye, it's much more effective when you say, well, this person seemed, people say, well, if I only had this, I'd be happy. If I was rich, I'd be happy. If I owned my own corporation, I'd be happy. And then you find out that the people that have all that stuff aren't really happy, and they have the same exact problems as we do. And that's, like, you can be a much more powerful witness, and I think God does work in that way too. So.
Well, and the proof of what you just said was that 2 years later, and I went to Akron and looked up the newspaper articles, and the Firestone family, for some reason, they didn't bring Shoemaker. They brought the founder of the Oxford Group, Dr. Frank Bookman, and Bookman was a great guy for having a bunch of lords and ladies and distinguished business people and clergymen and so forth. So 30 of them came to Akron, and they took over the church pulpits. Necessarily, I think they were Protestant pulpits, but nonetheless, on the Sundays during this brief period in roughly February of 33, they were in every pulpit on Sunday witnessing. And then they had a huge dinner at the Mayflower Hotel. And when you see the newspaper articles, there were pictures of these dudes as if they were going to the opera. I mean, they had top hats and tails, and it was a big deal. And I suppose it just demonstrated what you were saying, and that is, if a Firestone
right.
was witnessing, and there were quotes in the paper, Christians can recover, and Christians study the Bible and stuff. Well, this is one reason it's anathema to so many in AA today. They just don't. I mean, they ought to go to Akron and look at the newspaper articles.
Well, I think that when someone hears that someone is a Christian, they think that it's this this grandiose thing of you become this pure and person that does not fall, that does not sin, that does not make mistakes, and that does nothing but whack people on the head with the Bible. And it's not true. Because even the greatest believers in spiritual maturity had fallen. David wasn't a new believer when he did the things that he did. He committed murder and adultery and all that stuff, and he did that as a mature believer. So you're still prone to sin even though you believe.
Well, and if you move to Christianity, and people just don't want to hear this, but there's a tremendous difference between a born-again Christian and a born-again Christian that is walking by the flesh. Yeah. We have free will.
Absolutely.
And I like to say when I'm talking, I could always drink. I could always watch porn flicks. I could always, chase women, gamble, and so forth, because God gave us the free will.
Yeah.
And the only thing that the born-again thing does is it makes us a new person with a new power and a new set of guidelines, which the Holy Spirit empowers us to implement. And so whenever I hear somebody tackling Wilson and his spiritualism, and they sure do, and Dr. Bob and his spiritualism, these boys fell just like everybody else.
Yep.
So you won't be burdened with me for 18 hours. We're going to move from the Akron Oxford group due in 1933 to the fact that Henrietta Seiberling had a lot of problems. They dumped her down at the Gate Lodge in the huge Seiberling estate. It was the largest estate and still is in Ohio, and it had a little gate lodge. And they dumped her down at the bottom there with her 3 children. And not much is known about John Frederick, the son of the F.A. Seiberling, who was her husband. But one way or the other, I don't think they ever got divorced. But they were, she was a woman without. She was a, what do they call them now? A fatherless family.
A single mom.
A single mom.
Yeah.
That's it. So she had her own troubles, and she had turned to Glenn Clark's book, The Soul's Sincere Desire, which a lot of early AAs read. And when this Seiberling, show from the Oxford group came to town, she had also been very concerned about Dr. Bob's drinking, that she knew Anne. So she roped Anne Smith, Dr. Bob's wife, and herself, and 2 other ladies who figured in the earliest of our history, to come to the dinner, along with T. Henry Williams, who was an ardent Oxford grouper. And they heard all this stuff, and for them it was ready-made. In other words, it wasn't Oxford group principles. It was just the fact that these people were all giving testimony that Christ had changed their lives. And so they immediately went to a little Oxford group meeting at the West Hill, called the West Hill Group.
Mm-hmm.
And they persuaded Dr. Bob to come. And he loved it. He liked the people. He liked their intelligence. He liked their manners. And he rejoined a church, became a charter member of the First Presbyterian Church there, Westside Presbyterian Church. And he started reading the Bible 3 times through and prayed and went to these meetings. And so people say, see, the Oxford group didn't work. No, Dr. Bob didn't want to quit drinking.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was president of my church, people were more interested in when I was going to quit drinking than the fact that I was president of the church.
Right.
Although I felt the other way, and that is, what's wrong with these people?
Well, you have to want one thing more than you want the other thing.
You got it.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take another break, and we'll be right back with more from Dick B. Hold on.